So we've gathered again for this. It's a very special reason for being here, and I need to thank you really for the effort to come, because the Buddha's teaching changes your life. It changes your view, and it enables you to handle life and properly gain out of life. People think that they're gaining out of life by through pleasure and financially and nice food and pleasurable things, but this is no gain really. In the long run, there's no gain. This is all temporary pleasure. Through the Dharma, through Buddhist practice, through changing your view, you will accumulate something that goes beyond this life. It completely makes your life special. Instead of the ordinary gains that are normal, what they call sentient being, sentient meaning feeling, a normal feeling being, sentient being experiences or tries to gain from life. So the reason I'm saying all this before we do the prayer is because we need to just feel now in this moment that we are here for a special reason. It's not for a normal, ordinary, worldly subject. It's because the Buddha manifested in this world and gave this very special wisdom for the humans to make spiritual progress and ascend from the normal cycle of existence that we keep and have been doing, going round for so long. And so this is extremely important wisdom and knowledge of life for all beings, that all beings should know, but the majority of beings are distracted and taken up, involved, over-involved in worldly existence, worldly life and trivial pleasures, and they for some reason miss out on this great and excellent wisdom given by the Buddha. So we are very fortunate to have found it, and we must do our best to try and change our view and our actions of body, speech and mind, so that in the future we can improve the situation, our own situation, but because we are Mahayana Buddhists, Mahayana means the highest path, we're trying to change our situation for the sake of all beings, not just for our own emancipation, but the emancipation of all beings. It's a very, very vast, huge aspiration, but we must try and do it. Even if we do just realize our own escape from the sordid, torturous wheel of existence, that's a great thing. But really, our ultimate goal must be for the escape, for the help, for the ending of suffering of all beings. But that's later on the path. For now, just to understand the system of life, what happens, and how to utilize it in a positive way instead of what we're doing at the moment, which is just a basic survival with a bit of pleasure thrown in. That's the main thing at the moment to understand. So anyway, for the reason I'm saying all this is so that we have a high respect, a great, sacred, holy respect for the Buddha who brought this information, because if it wasn't for him, there would be no Buddhism, there would be no Dharma in this world, and the world would be a very, very dark place without it. You know, you've got to remember that there's 1 billion Buddhists in the world, and they make a huge difference to the general atmosphere and goodness of the world. And there's still a lot of problems in the world, a very dark place really overall. But imagine what it would be like without those 1 billion Buddhists. So we'd say this prayer, this refuge prayer, just out of respect, absolute respect to the holy and most virtuous sacred Buddha that brought the Dharma to this world. Sangye chodan soge chodnamala jangchu bado dadni kapsunchi dagin jiso gipe sonamaki dolar penche sangye to pasho sangye chodan soge chodnamala jangchu bado dadni kapsunchi dagin jiso gipe sonamaki dolar penche sangye to pasho sangye chodan soge chodnamala jangchu bado dadni kapsunchi dagin jiso gipe so what you can do is you can do this prayer, you take this with you, and you can take it home. And if you're going to come regularly, then you can learn it in Tibetan. Or if you're at home and you don't want to say it in Tibetan, if you do want to say it in Tibetan or English, you just whispered tones. You don't need to say it loud. But it is very good karma to say it verbally. Even though you're only whispering, it still counts as speech, purifying the speech. And that is the topic of tonight, because last time we spoke about the outside wheel, and we started at the top with ignorance. And ignorance, as you know, is the basis of rebirth. Ignorance is the basis of rebirth. If we don't have ignorance, we don't have to take rebirth if we don't want to. We have the choice. Some, once they attain liberation, do take a holiday. They don't take rebirth. It's a very high subject, I understand. But as Mahayanists, we yearn to come back. Once we attain liberation, once we attain enlightenment of a certain level, we do wish to come back and spread the Dharma and help people to understand the suffering situation that we are in. The suffering of the human realm is obvious if you look at the news, but obviously many people have got jobs that involve so much suffering, nurses, etc., doctors. They see suffering every day. And frankly, you've got to admire their bravery and patience when they spend their whole lives seeing suffering, and they still remain with that spirit of helping, and it never gets them down, and it's wonderful. It's a very wonderful. And all this suffering that's in the human realm, I mean, we've got to bear in mind that there's 6 realms in the what this is known as the Bhava Chakra. Bhava means existence, chakra means wheel. So this is the wheel of existence. And the whole of existence, that's all the sentient beings, that's anywhere that an unliberated or a deluded being can be born, are included within these 6 classes. And they are in the middle, obviously the middle has got the 3 animals, the outer circle has got the 12 interdependent links, and in between is the 6 realms. And in the middle at the top is the heavens, the long life God realms, and at the bottom in the middle is the lower realms, the hells, and on the right is the hungry ghosts, and on the left is the animals. I might have got that around the wrong way. And on the left at the top is the human realm, and on the right is the demigods. And so you've got 3 upper realms and 3 lower realms. And you'll notice that the animals is the highest of the lower realms, and the human realm is the lowest of the higher realms. So the animals is the highest of the lower realms, the humans is the lowest of the higher realms, and yet we share this world together, the animals and the humans. So why are they in 2 separate segments, 2 separate categories or classes? And that is because this wheel is classifying levels of consciousness, not locations. Levels of consciousness means that the human consciousness is higher than the animal consciousness, and the animal consciousness is very much prone to ignorance. Their main delusion is ignorance. And the human intellect is mostly prone to the delusion of desire, and so it's a higher, less torturous, less dementing sort of problem. Desire is still bad, desire, but it's not as bad as the ignorance. And then the lower realms, lower than the animals, they've got anger and jealousy, which are even heavier burdens, mental burdens, than ignorance. So anyway, basically, although what I'm trying to say is, in a long-winded way, is that the suffering that we think, although we think there's a lot of suffering in the human world, and we see it every day, the endless wars and murder and epidemics and old age and diseases, mental diseases, physical diseases, and illnesses and accidents, etc. There's endless suffering in the human realm. But in comparison to the animal realm, it's absolutely insignificant. The human suffering is insignificant compared to the animal realm. Just by going down into dropping one class into the realm below increases the suffering 1,000-fold.
And is that because they're constantly in fear of being captured, of being eaten?
Well, what happens in the animal realm, for example, is if you look at it in terms of lifespan, we are surprised when someone dies in their mid-30s, for example, or dies in their 40s, or even when people die in their 50s now, they're saying, so young. In the animal realm, it's very, very extremely, if you look at it in terms of numbers, statistically, to live more than a year in the animal realm is statistically virtually impossible. It's compared, if you look at all the numbers, the amount of beings that die in the first year after they're born, compared to the amount of animals that last more than a year, it's 95% the first year. There are so many beings in the animal realm, so many animals, insects, fish, etc., that die within the first hour. So we have to be aware of this. Must be aware of this impermanence, and we must use this knowledge to stop grasping at life and realize that the body and existence isn't the answer. It isn't important. It isn't what it is important for is to realize what's really going on. It's not important to live. You understand? So life is very precious to us and we're attached to it, but it's totally impermanent. Everybody is dying, every being is dying, and there's nothing depressing about it. It's just the truth. It's only depressing because we've put so much value on it. And the thing that makes it so valuable to us is the idea of the self. And the idea of the self is not real. The idea of the self is just an idea. Through this misunderstanding, we highly value something that is totally impermanent. Totally impermanent. And so when we think about the great wisdom masters, this is the 5 Sakya masters here, one of the things that they are called masters for, what they have mastered is the truth. Instead of this dream that we have, that it's us, inherently core existent me, nothing possibly could ever happen. It's beyond our consideration that anything could possibly, that this could ever end. We feel permanent. We don't want to even acknowledge that we are subject to the same laws as everything else in the universe. It's our attachment to the idea of self which causes that permanent attachment, that attachment to permanence, that idea that we are infallible. And so it's a big problem. It's a huge problem for every single human, not just in this world, but in all the human worlds throughout the universes. It's a huge delusion, and the delusion is called grasping at inherent existence. And it's It's absolute nonsense, but everyone believes in it, and we copy each other, we talk to each other, we validate the self to each other in conversation and in our actions and in everything, and then it grows and it becomes stronger. And so what I must say, pass on to you from the Buddha is, do not follow the others just because everyone believes in a self. There is no reason, there is no valid reason, there is not one single thing which constitutes this idea of self that we've got. It's where all the selfishness comes from, it's where all the harm comes from, it's where all the greed, jealousy, pride, everything that's wrong in the world, every single suffering comes from this idea of the inherently existent core personality, identity, self, and yet there's no such thing. If you check the blood, the body, the mind, the bones, the skin, every single thing, toenails, hair, eyes, ears, hearing, seeing, smelling, touching, everything that makes up your idea of a self, you cannot find a personal, identifiable, individual, core existent self in any of it. But no one checks. Everyone takes this collection of sensory input and feeling and what they see in a mirror and what other people are doing, and they watch it all together and they call it me. But if you check, Buddha said, if you check, this is the beauty of the Buddha's wisdom, the reason the Buddhas manifest is this sole reason, is to tell people that this grasping, each time we're born, grasping at this idea of self is the main delusion, it's the main fault. And it's because of this that we go to war. It's because of this that we fight with others, other tribes, other clans throughout history, the village next door, the country over the sea. It's the same cause all the way through, and it never changes. People just keep believing it's so precious to us. This is me. And yet, from the moment we're born to the moment we die, is nothing but torturous suffering. We're chasing something that doesn't exist. It's utterly impossible. So that's the basis of the Dharma. That's the main thing. And that ignorance, which causes that idea, each time we die, we still believe in a self, and that's what that top icon symbol means. It's just that basic ignorance of not realizing that there is no such thing as an independent person. We're all the same. Everything is equal. That's what we call omniscience. We must realize that everything is, but that's quite high. But it's what our ultimate aim is in this life for our practice. If we can get to that realization before we pass, that is a great, very, very special thing. And this information needs to be known by absolutely everyone, because unless we realize this, we will always have problems. We'll never be able to escape. So anyway, through this ignorance, we move to so we've passed away, and we've entered into what we call the clear light, or the luminosity, or the nature of mind, the pure, naked nature of mind. But because of our veiled mind, our confused mind, our bewildered, obstructed, obscured mind, we've missed that chance, and now we start to re-emerge. And the first step of that re-emergence is the next symbol, which is karmic formations. Karmic formations has got no personality. There's no person involved. This is a mental state, something very, very subtle which is happening. And it's, in my opinion, well, not in my opinion, it is the most fundamental of all the stages, really, apart from obviously the basic ignorance. This is the thing that causes all of the results, all of the fruits, if you like, the ripened seeds of one's previous actions. So basically what happens is you've had a previous life, and before that you've had many other previous lives, and this has planted many good and bad seeds on the mental continuum, your mental continuum. The important thing here that you must know is that the way you pass very much depends on what seeds ripen, good or bad seeds ripening. So, for example, you've got good and bad seeds. Say you've got many good seeds for helping people, generosity, kindness, You've had a very helpful, kind job, and you've planted many virtuous seeds on your mental continuum, but you've also got negative seeds, not necessarily from this life, the life you're leaving now, but from lives before that. Sorry. So, going back through your previous lives, your last life might have been very positive, but before that, it might have been animal rebirths, it could have been anything, and you've done many negative things. As you pass away, it's very, very important that your mind remains relaxed and undisturbed. And that is very difficult when you're dying. It's very easy and it's very common for most people to feel anxious, fearful, and even angry at the point of death. It's especially in the West, because we've got so much attachment to family, belongings, our idea of self. We don't want to leave, and so we're anxious and annoyed. And what this does is this causes the negative seeds that have been planted on the mental continuum from previous lives, not necessarily this good life you've just had, to ripen, and then that can cause problems, and you can be reborn suddenly, thrown, we call it throwing karma. You can be thrown into let's call it a disagreeable realm, life with disagreeable, unpleasant conditions, animal, for example, or worse, who knows? It's very, very complicated. You can't say definitely. But what you can say is that if you are at peace, and certainly if you're loving, and if you've got a virtuous sense in your mind as you pass, then it's almost guaranteed that you will ripen the positive seeds on your mental continuum, and you will take higher rebirth. It's almost guaranteed. So, and what happens then? So what do we do then? For example, now we've been born as humans. That's because, fortunately, positive seeds, karmic seeds on the mental continuum were ripened last time, and we've been born as human now. So now what do we do? Of course, what we have to do now is use this life to purify the negative seeds that are still on our mental continuum. That is the whole point of the practice. And there are various methods. And one of the methods, which is extremely meritorious, in other words, excellent for purifying negative deeds, is to make these, that's why we've set this up, is to make these 7 bowls of water offerings and a light. You don't have to do the lamp, but the lamp is has a kind of also meritorious meaning. And to a Buddha, but it doesn't have to be a statue like this. It just can be a picture. It can just be a small picture of a Buddha. None of this needs to be, these bowls don't need to be as elaborate as this. None of it needs to be elaborate. Just by using 7 bowls and a picture of the Buddha, you can accumulate vast merit. In other words, purify thousands and thousands of lifetimes of negative deeds by doing this practice. I can't put an exact number on, because it depends on your motivation, your faith, and your confession, and your rejoicing in others. But there's a 7-limb prayer which you can do at the same time, and it will take you 10 minutes every day, and you fill up the bowls from the left to the right. You don't leave them full overnight. You fill them up each day. You empty them at night. You just do it when you first get up in the morning, say prayer, say this refuge prayer, and genuinely feel like you have a connection to the holy, excellent, sacred Buddha, the virtue, perfectly pure virtue is what you're looking at when you look at that picture or statue of the Buddha. And that should remind you that that is possible, to be perfectly virtuous, perfectly kind, perfectly compassionate, perfectly selfless. Every day you can do this before you go to work, as you get up, and it will change your life and change your day and change your mind and change all your future lives. And if you do it really well, what you will be doing it for is not yourself at all. You'll be doing it for the sake of all beings. And that really does make it infinitely powerful, because you're talking about infinite beings. The amount of beings in all the universes, in all the realms, is innumerable. And so if you do this practice for the sake of innumerable beings, it is innumerable merit, even if you only do it once in your life. But if you do it every day, the karma is, just unimaginable, absolutely unimaginable. And so to finish it off, the last stage of this practice is you dedicate it. You just think or say, I dedicate the merit of this to the full enlightenment of myself for the sake of all beings. May I become a fully enlightened Buddha for the sake of all. May all beings be released, find the emancipation from suffering forever. And that's it. That's the dedication. You truly mean it in your heart, and that will last. There is nothing that can destroy that. No burglar can come and take it away. Nobody can vandalize it. When you die, it stays with you. Everything else you've done in your life is nothing. It's just what we call mundane karma. But this will stay with you until enlightenment, because you've dedicated it to enlightenment. It is said that someone who does this and then goes and commits some grievous, heinous crime, that grievous, heinous crimes normally grievous, heinous crimes involve anger, because Buddha said anger is like the spark that burns down the forest. All right, so it's a terrible thing to know, really, but it can be discouraging to know this, but just try and be as careful as you can, never ever to get angry. Because basically what happens is you can destroy all your merit, what we call undedicated merit, in 1 second of anger. So we have to avoid anger at all costs. It doesn't matter what happens, never ever get angry. But it is said that when you do this practice and you've dedicated it to enlightenment, even if you get angry, it doesn't diminish. Nothing can damage it. Once you've done any, and not just this, but any action which is dedicated to enlightenment lasts. It's indestructible.